Greetings world. We are anonymous. For decades, vulnerable children from care homes and other institutions were booked to order by rich and powerful men for sex. This is the allegation put forward in Nightmares at Home Guesthouse in an interview with Chris Fay of the National Association for Young People in Care. As another significant member of the Conservative Party is about to be outed, we take a closer look at these allegations and ask, how much longer can the UK establishment keep this story suppressed? In 1974, a group of child sex abusers launched the Pedophile Information Exchange, PIE. This group was legal at the time and sought to promote the rights of pedophiles. The group espoused the view that children had the right to indulge in their sexual feelings with adults and argued the age of consent should be lowered to 4 years old or abolished altogether. This was not some fringe group, hidden away. They had thousands of members, many from senior positions in the media, the security services, politics, and other establishment positions. The members were public and built affiliations with the Gay Liberation Front, the Campaign for Homosexual Equality, mental health charity Mind, and even human rights organization Liberty, previously named the National Council for Civil Liberties. The leaders of PIE shared platforms with Harriet Harman, Patricia Hewitt, and others. PIE members had been using the contact page of their magazine, the Magbike, to connect and network with each other. They also used it to introduce consumers of child pornography to suppliers. In 1978, the homes of PIE members were raided, and they faced charges of conspiracy against public morality. One person, however, was not tried. He was referred to as Mr. Henderson, until the private eye outed him as Sir Peter Hayman, a senior diplomat and former British High Commissioner to Canada. While other PIE members, who indulged in the same activity as Hayman, were sent for trial at the Old Bailey, Hayman was sent home by the Attorney General and carried on regardless. PIE was dissolved in 1984, but not before it had allowed for the creation of a powerful network of pedophiles within the most senior ranks of the UK establishment. In the documentary, Nightmares at Home Guesthouse, former National Adult Advisor of the National Association for Young People in Care, NAYPIC, Chris Fay, attests that this pedophile ring was widely known, but that the membership of such senior figures had a double lock effect. Firstly, the members were in positions of such seniority that they had the political and financial power to keep stories suppressed, close down police investigations, and keep members out of jail. Secondly, the members were such significant establishment faces that the potential impact of their exposure incentivized those around them who knew to keep quiet. The Elm Guesthouse was a B&B in Barnes, West London, run by Hayward and Carol Cassier. The guesthouse pitched itself as gay-friendly, but such a description does a great disservice to the gay community. On or around the Queen's Silver Jubilee, in 1977, it began to host kings and queens parties for pedophiles, whereby members of PIE and another group promoting the sexual abuse of children, the Spartacus Club, could fulfill their desires. It is alleged that from 1977 onward, rich and powerful men were provided with a menu of children's photographs and school reports by members of Richmond Social Services. Once chosen, the child would be sourced from their children's home, most commonly Grafton Close, just 8 miles away, and taken to Elm Guesthouse. On arrival, the children would be drugged and abused, sometimes on camera, in the video facilities room, sometimes in the sauna, sometimes at sex parties, in a back room. Carol Cassier claimed to have kept names from the guest register of Elm Guesthouse, which include major establishment figures. The names are Anthony Blunt, Royal Connections, MI5, Traitor, Russian Spy Deceased; Harvey Proctor, Monday Club, well-known convicted pedophile; Sir Peter Bottomley, Worthing MP, and Monday Club; Charles Irving; Leon Britton, Lord, ex-Thatcher Minister, likely the Tory ex-minister referred to anonymously in recent newspaper reports; Peter Brook, Life Peer; John Rowe, MI5, former MP; Cyril Smith, deceased, ex-Rochdale MP; Ron Brown; Colin Jordan, ex-National Front leader; George Tremlett, former GLC leader; Peter Campbell, Monday Club; Gary Walker, sin fine. Cliff Richard, aged pop star, known at Helm Guesthouse as Kitty. Jess Conrad, aged ex-pop star. Ron Wells, aged musician, aka Gladys, at Helm Guesthouse. Richard Miles, Monday Club. Chris Denning, ex-BBC. DJ, convicted pedophile. R. Langley, Buckingham Palace Equerry. Terry Dwyer, Patrick Puddles. Lewis Minster, head of Richmond Social Services. Colin Peters, QC, a convicted pedophile, sentenced to 8 years in 1989. Steve Everett, senior Westminster social worker. Ray Wire, so-called expert on pedophile therapy. Peter Glencross, editor of Monday Club newsletter. Guy Hamilton Blackwell, son of Westland Helicopters chairman. The plight of one particular boy illustrates the horrific nature of this network of abuse. Peter Hatton Bornchen and his brother David were put into care after their mother committed suicide in the 1970s. They were 12 and 13. One day, they were told by senior workers at Grafton Close Children's Home that they were going a treat. Their treat was a visit to Elm Guesthouse. Peter, his brother, and other boys were made to dress up as fairies, encouraged to become drunk, and invited to play a game of hide and seek. The boys were told to hide, and when caught by the adult men, would be sexually abused by their captor. Some of the men who raped, tortured, and sexually abused Peter and David have been named as Liberal MP Cyril Smith, Catholic priest Father Tony McSweeney, who officiated at the wedding of Frank Bruno, and deputy manager of Grafton Close Children's Home, John Stingmore, who also supplied the boys. Peter never got over the abuse he received at the hands of these men. He later complained about his treatment, and received compensation from Richmond Council, while the story remained suppressed. He fell into poor mental health, and was treated at Broadmoor. In 1994, just days after his 28th birthday, he killed himself with a fatal drug overdose. His suicide note included the words, "I will get those bastards." The Elm Guesthouse was raided in 1982. Police found 5 pornographic videos of children, evidence of the cashier's neglect of their son Eric, and other vice charges. Over the next year, all charges related to the Elm Guesthouse were dropped, and only the cashiers faced charges of running a brothel, for which they received a suspended sentence. The Elm Guesthouse closed shortly thereafter. In 1990, with her husband dead and son Eric removed from her custody, it is alleged that Carol Kassir invited NAYPIC's Chris Fay to view the contents of a box, which she claims contained a photograph of Leon Britton while he was a minister of government, dressed as a nurse, with a naked 14-year-old boy on his lap. Kassir had many other pictures of senior members of the UK establishment at the King's and Queen's parties. Kassir refused to give Fay the box, but agreed for him to return a few days later and take photograph of the items. Kassir was found dead on the 17th of June 1990, age 47, before this meeting could take place. It was claimed she killed herself with an insulin overdose. Chris Fay and his colleague, Mary Moss, believe she was murdered. They argue the last injection found on her body was 72 hours old, and it is unheard of for a person to receive an insulin overdose and live for 72 hours. The syringe mark was also on her posterior, but she normally injected the insulin into her arm. The only person to corroborate Kassir's handwriting in the suicide note was David Dissett, a known pedophile, with links to PIE and the Spartacus Club. Kassir had received threatening phone calls and intimidation from the police prior to her death. One example of earlier efforts to expose the network. Even if not complicit, the child sexual abuse ring around Elm Guesthouse, Grafton Close, and the UK establishment must have breathed a collective sigh of relief at Kassir's death. They had survived the police raid on PIE in 1978, which took out non-establishment members of PIE, but left the wider network and establishment figures untouched. Conservative MP Geoffrey Dickens repeatedly raised the issue of the London-based network of sexual abusers of children between 1981 and 1985. Dickens is believed he had uncovered an establishment network with what he described as big names. He held a 30-minute meeting with the Home Secretary in 1984, handing over a dossier of his evidence. The meeting is captured in both Hansard and the media at the time, with Dickens describing himself as encouraged following the meeting. The Home Secretary of the day, however, was none other than Leon Britton himself, named as a frequenter of Elm Guesthouse on the registers in Cassier's possession. The dossier never surfaced, no action was taken. Leon Britton claims no recollection of this publicly recorded meeting, and the Home Office say they have found no trace of the dossier. With both Carol and Hayward Cassier dead, the Elm Guesthouse closed, and PIE disbanded. Only the children and their alleged abusers remained to tell the story. It seemed the establishment had won, and the secrets would die with those who held them. Key figures from the period were also starting to reach the natural end of their lives before the truth of the network could be uncovered. MI5 and Special Branch helped maintain the cover of Cyril Smith until his death in 2010. Jimmy Savile had also been protected from prosecution for rampant rape and sexual abuse of children, from when rumors first began circulating in 1964, to his death in 2011, which meant another key name and holder of secrets had left the scene. But immediately after his death, a sign of how open his secrets must have been, BBC Newsnight began an investigation into the allegations, and the whole network began to blow up by tracing Savile's movements and interactions. The latest series of press interest and police investigations was triggered by Labour MP Tom Watson, who timed judiciously a question to Prime Minister David Cameron at the height of the furor over Jimmy Savile. Tom Watson requested a full investigation of allegations of a powerful pedophile network linked to the Parliament, and number 10 at Prime Minister's questions on the 24th of October 2012. The Metropolitan Police launched Operation Fairbank shortly thereafter, and repeatedly denied such an investigation was underway when challenged by interested parties. Since that time, Operation Fernbridge has undertaken to investigate and prosecute those associated with the Elm Guesthouse. The actions of Tom Watson MP have helped raise awareness, while NAYPIC's Chris Fay and Mary Moss, reporters at XRO News, and filmmakers, such as Bill Maloney, have investigated over decades and provided the necessary evidence to maintain the case in the face of overwhelming pressure to suppress it. It is time to end the networks. Grafton closed children's home, celebrate the royal wedding in 1981 with alleged child supplier Neil Keir on barbecue duty. I have long left this subject to others to write about. I had to sense that I should remain quiet on the matter until the legal process had concluded. I changed my mind after watching Nightmares at Elm Guesthouse and reviewing the litany of prior police investigations, court cases, and media scandals on the matter. It appears that however close it has seemed, justice has failed to be done for many decades. The establishment has circled the wagons each time, sacrificed a pun or two to sate the appetites of public and press, then carried on business as usual. When one looks closer, we are facing the unfolding nightmare that politicians, pop stars, and media figures have been supplied vulnerable children to rape and abuse by members of the social services over decades. It is beginning to appear quite certain that a significant number of children's homes and institutions for young people have been complicit in abuse on an industrial scale. It is also apparent that a persistent cover-up has people silenced, threatened, and perhaps even killed to maintain the silence and the networks of abuse. The list is growing as follows. Otolagaran Children's Home in Jersey. The network of 6 children's homes in and around Nottingham. Long-term and extensive abuse at the network of children's homes in North Wales. The abuse at a church in Edinburgh Children's Home. A series of allegations against staff at Cranbourne Children's Home in Kent. The Duncroft-approved school for girls, which provided Jimmy Savile with children with whom to engage in sex acts. These are but a few of the scandals to emerge in recent years. The reason for us all to pay attention, and for independent journalists and parties to maintain the pressure on this story, is simple. It is likely that the networks and foul individuals involved have been allowed to fester, largely unchallenged, by the institutions intended to hold them to account. The police, Parliament, the press, all compromised and capitulated. When members of these institutions were brave enough to come forward, they faced the full force of the establishment. So it is on us to stand up and be counted, so that this time, justice is firmly and finally done, in honor of each of the children abused repeatedly by the so-called great and good of the UK establishment. We do not know the guilt of any of those suspected, but we must ensure claims are fully investigated, and where guilt is found, appropriate consequences are delivered. We are anonymous. We are legion. We will not forgive these pedophiles. We will not forget the children whom they tortured. To the UK establishment, you will be expecting us